The 25 best players in the 2022 NFL Draft through a New Orleans Saints lens, top 5 quarterbacks, and are the New Orleans Saints simply posturing to force the hands of the teams ahead of them in this year's draft? We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks as always for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. And don't forget that we are free and available on all platforms, including on YouTube as well. And I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter, USA Today's Saints Wire, Locked On NFL on Tuesdays, and here with you every single Monday through Friday on Locked On Saints. And on today's episode, I want to break down the top 25 players, my top 25 players in this year's NFL draft through the New Orleans Saints lens. So we're talking about the top 25 players in this year's draft that fit for the New Orleans Saints. So it's going to mean a couple of different things, right? It's going to mean that there are going to be some unconventional players maybe at the top. There will certainly be some unconventional players in terms of those that would be left off the list. And there are going to be no quarterbacks on this top 25 list because I had such a hard time trying to find a way to get quarterbacks into this top quarter century of players, and it just didn't happen. So let's break it all down and take a look at the top 25 players for me in this year's 2022 NFL draft class with the New Orleans Saints lens, putting their fit first, right? Positional need, stuff like that also factors into that. So just to sort of clarify what that means about positional need, it's one of the reasons why quarterback didn't really fall to the top of the list for me. The other reason, or the other thing that you'll see from this is that position like linebacker, only one linebacker in this group, even though you could probably make an argument in terms of overall draft outlook for one or two linebackers. And then interior offensive lineman kind of falls off in this one for me as well. I know a lot of folks are talking about, hey, the Saints should try to replace Cesar Ruiz or try to work on Cesar Ruiz, whatever. You can do all of that without having to invest a first round draft pick, however. So those are some positions that were adversely affected by the fact that I was looking at this through the Saints lens. So without further ado, here we go. We'll go through these 5 at a time and I'll highlight just a couple of the things that I think are interesting. Some of them will come as no surprise. So for picks 1 through 5 here, or places 1 through 5, I've got Kyle Hamilton, Kayvon Thibodeau, Charles Cross, Evan Neal, and Adrian Hutchinson. So you see at that point, or Aiden Hutchinson, excuse me. So at that point, we've got Kyle Hamilton at the very top. He, to me, is the best overall player in this draft. No questions asked. I don't care about his 40 time, not for what he does and not for what you can see on his tape. You're not going to sway me off of Kyle Hamilton. So Kyle Hamilton's right at the top for me. Kayvon Thibodeau, I still have as the top edge rusher in this year's class. I think that his drop off and his draft stock has been one of the most ridiculous things I've watched during a draft cycle, similar to what happened last year with Justin Fields. It's just what happens when, people get to talking to themselves too much. And then, you do something, you stare at it for too long, and then you find something wrong with it. And then you end up being of detriment to yourself. I think that's what's happened to Kayvon Thibodeau while he's just kind of minding his own business, trying to get ready for the NFL. And then on the third one here, I've got Charles Cross. And you might be thinking, hey, what about Evan Neal? What about Ike Ekwonu? Like, yes, those are both great tackles as well. And I think that in an overall draft class, without looking at it through a specific fit or lens, that they would definitely be offensive tackle number 1. But for me, looking through the Saints lens, Charles Cross is at the top of the list for me. Very good pass blocker, needs some work in terms of the run game. But because of the game that the New Orleans Saints look to deploy on the offensive side this year, which is going to be a pass-heavy team that does rely on the run, at least that's what I expect, and I expect that Charles Cross would be the best fit out of all of these. Then we've got Evan Neal and Aiden Hutchinson. Okay, 6 through 10, the back half of the top 10 here. Sauce Gardner, cornerback out of Cincinnati. Ike Ekwonu is right there. Jameson Williams, our first wide receiver. Then we've got Derek Stingley Jr. from LSU, and then Jermaine Johnson, the edge rusher that's actually been around throughout the majority of this draft process, raised his stock at the Senior Bowl. He's not somebody that came out of nowhere like another name you're going to hear a little bit later. Sauce Gardner just goes up at the top for me on top of Derek Stingley because of health. Jameson Williams, I know I just said that I'm knocking Derek Stingley down because of health, and we've got Jameson Williams who just, tore an ACL during the national championship game. But I can't get over how good Jameson Williams is. And to me, he's the top wide receiver in this year's draft class. He's just an electrifying player that if he can come back to 80 to 90% of himself when he was at Alabama, he's going to be a fantastic pro. Okay. 11 through 15, here is a place where we would expect to see a lot of names for the New Orleans Saints, and that's what you're going to get here. Trevor Penning, offensive tackle. Then we got 2 back-to-back Ohio State wide receivers, Chris Olave on top, Garrett Wilson right behind, then Trayvon Walker, Andrew Booth Jr. So Andrew Booth Jr. is a name to watch. I think that it's hard to pass on any of these top cornerbacks at any point as well if you're any team across the NFL. So he's in this range. Trayvon Walker, I haven't bought into the hype of Trayvon Walker. I'm sorry, I haven't. I really, really haven't. I know he's a very good player, but I'm weary of players that end up having their draft stock just sort of shoot up out of nowhere near the end of a draft cycle. I'm cool. I think that was a lot of people talking themselves out of Kayvon Thibodeau and then feeling like they needed to talk themselves into somebody else after they've already done talk themselves into Aiden Hutchinson. So for me, Trayvon Walker is a little bit further down the list for me. But Trevor Penning, Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, all fantastic options for the Saints at 16 and 19 in any order. I have Chris Olave just a little bit ahead of Garrett Wilson because, again, I'm thinking about this through the Saints lens, and I like Chris Olave's fit for the Saints probably better than any other wide receiver outside of maybe Jameson Williams. Plus, Olave doesn't have the injury concern there. Okay, 16 through 20, we've got safety Jaquan Brisker, second safety on the list there. Our first linebacker in Devin Lloyd, George Karlaftis, the edge rusher out of Purdue, Traylon Burks, wide receiver out of Arkansas, and then Devontae Wyatt out of Georgia. So for me, this back half of 20 is a place where you can see some potentially falling players, right? As we get into 2025, this is where you can start to see some of these players start to fall off because of position value, low impact positions, things like that, especially Jaquan Brisker. Jaquan Brisker is one of those guys that he plays a safety position that's further away from the line of scrimmage, literally the furthest away from the line of scrimmage, depending upon where you have him lined up. And because of that, he's considered a low impact position. And so he could be one of those players that might be in my top 20, but might be available at 49. So we were talking yesterday about Mickey Loomis saying that they believe that at 16, 19, and 49, they could walk away with 3 top 20 or 3 top 25 players. A guy like Chris Olave at 16 or 19, a guy like Trevor Penning or Charles Cross at 16 or 19, and then a guy like Jaquan Brisker at 49. That's how you do it. That's how you would get those 3 top 20 or top 25 players there. And there are a couple of other players that could end up falling a little bit more than we think because of positional value, because of the impact of that position, all of that, teams not wanting to invest first round picks in certain positions. So that's why I end up having Jaquan Brisker in that top 20 area between 15 and 20, because those are those players that could end up falling down a little bit further than maybe we expect. And then to continue that trend, 21, 22 through 25, we've got 21, Daxton Hill, the safety out of Michigan. And then we have Tyler Linderbaum, the offensive lineman, interior offensive lineman, center. So he's our first and only interior offensive lineman on this list. Number 23, Drake London, wide receiver out of USC. Trent McDuffie of Washington, another cornerback to watch at 24. And then Jordan Davis, the Georgia defensive tackle. Again, I've just got Wyatt above Davis because he plays a little bit more of the role that I think the Saints are looking for. So that drops Jordan Davis down a little bit for me. Jordan Davis playing more of a kind of 2-gap, nose tackle type, but has a ton of athleticism and all that. But Wyatt has all that athleticism, incredible get off, great explosion, and is a little bit more of a pass rusher as well. Great pass rushing moves, fantastic interior swing move, all the things that I like when it comes to a defensive tackle. So that's why he's up a little bit higher. So that's our top 25. Looking at everything through the New Orleans Saints lens, as well as how the Saints could leave the first 3 picks of their draft with 3 of those players. Again, a Trevor Penning or, another offensive lineman, offensive tackle that falls like a Charles Cross, and then one of these wide receivers in 16 and 19, and then potentially Jaquan Brisker back at 49. That's a mock that you've seen me do a ton over the course of the last, 4 or 5 weeks or so. And so I think that still rings true as a potential for the New Orleans Saints to walk away with those 3 players that Mickey Loomis referenced just to Peter King over the course of the weekend. So now, again, no quarterbacks on the list when it comes to the top 25. So let's talk about the quarterbacks. Who's number 1? Who's number 5? And where does Kenny Pickett fall, the name that's consistently attached to the New Orleans Saints? Well, not necessarily where you might expect. So we'll break that down as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. First, I want to tell you about our friends over at betonline.net, the best, fastest, easiest, number 1 place for you to get in on all of your sports betting, all of your sports betting needs, tracking all the trends in action over with BetOnline. line. So if you want to take a look at maybe some of the over-unders for potential draft picks, you can look at that. You could take a look at potential places where some of these remaining free agents could end up. Or if you're not interested in betting on football right now during the course of the offseason, you still got the NBA playoffs right around the corner. The Pelicans, the Spurs. The Pelicans going to be hosting the Spurs on Wednesday, tomorrow for the play-in game to get into the playoffs. You want to get in on that or anything else going around the NBA playoffs, go and check them out over at betonline.net, which you can go to on your mobile device. You can go to it on your laptop, whatever it is, to make sure you're keeping up with all the trends and actions. Go and check them out. It's BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Thanks as always for making us your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget to go and check out that Locked On NFL YouTube page as well. Luke Braun, David Harrison holding it down for me yesterday on Locked On NFL. Talked about a lot of the position rankings that are going on all around the league, where guys like Khair Elam could potentially end up. And so it kind of inspired me a little bit to take a look at, the top 20 to 25 players based upon Mickey Loomis's comments later over the weekend. But then I wanted to dig a little bit deeper into quarterbacks, since there were no quarterbacks in my top 25. So where did the quarterbacks all rank? And what's the big surprise? Well, big surprise for me is that Kenny Pickett might be a little bit lower than you might expect. So for me, the number one quarterback in this draft is Malik Willis. I've been consistent about that. He was the best one that I got to see in person at the Senior Bowl. He was great indoor, outdoor, in the rain, outside the rain, whatever. The guy was just absolutely phenomenal. He has a lot of the tools that I really like as somebody that can hold strong in a pocket, doesn't do it a lot, didn't have to do it a lot over at Liberty, or maybe didn't get a chance to do it a lot over at Liberty, but can be that guy. We saw that at the Senior Bowl, but then that can also move into like some second phase stuff and end up, extending plays and operating out of structure, all those little things that I really, really like. And that kind of fit today's quarterback, right? Like that always has felt like that's where everything is going in the NFL. I think that will only last so long, but for the most part, you have to at least be able to operate out of phase for the most part. So I think that Malik Willis absolutely does that. And I think he's going to be the first quarterback off the board, whether that's number 2 to the Detroit Lions, number 6 to the Carolina Panthers, number 8 to the Atlanta Falcons, or a potential trade up for the Panthers or the Falcons. And we'll talk a little bit more about potential placement for these quarterbacks here in just a sec. But for me, Malik Willis is the first quarterback off the board. All right. Not necessarily the second quarterback off the board, but to me, QB2 is Cincinnati's Desmond Ridder. Don't like it? That's fine. That's okay. You don't have to. You might feel differently. But again, he's somebody that has some things to clean up accuracy-wise, but I think we'll get an opportunity to be able to do that with some NFL coaching, standing a little bit more strong in his base. These things are easily fixable and diagnosable, right? You can't change things like hand size. You can't change things like physical size, but you can change things like, hey, you need to clean up and get your release more consistent. Those are things that you can clean up. So that's why I think Desmond Ridder is a little bit more pro-ready, just simply based on the fact that he has the tools to be a long-time pro in the NFL. And I think some people will sit there and say, oh, well, he's Ryan Tannehill. Sure, fine. I'll take it. You know what I mean? If I'm a quarterback needy team, I don't think that the Saints are in that situation, obviously with Jameis at the helm, but you'll take that if you're a quarterback needy team. So for me, Desmond Ridder is the second quarterback there. I also love his ability to operate out of structure as well, his ability to pick up some yards on the ground. He's a smart player, very experienced starter. I love the fact that he has been a 4-year starter, that he has played so much football. I like all of that and sort of the intangible high football IQ stuff that I really, really enjoy. All right, at number 3 comes in Kenny Pickett out of Pitt. I think some folks will probably have him over Ridder, maybe even have him over Malik Willis, which I think is a little wild. But hey, again, it's about personal preference when it comes to these things and these top 5 lists and stuff like that. But I've got Kenny Pickett there at number 3. I'm sorry, I'm not very impressed by his level of play and everything that he had over at Pittsburgh. He has not really been, for me, the quarterback that has jumped off the page or that has made me kind of ooh and ah. That has been Malik Willis, and at times that has been Desmond Ridder. He doesn't have the leader personality that I expect from a quarterback like Desmond Ridder does, like Malik Willis does. Talking to all 3 of them at the Combine as well as at the Senior Bowl, I didn't find myself really enthralled with his leadership capability. He was a little bit more of a quiet, more reserved guy. But remember, we said all the same things about Justin Herbert, and look at what he's gone on to do with the Chargers. So, whatever. But the hand size thing, the gloves, all these things, they're things you can't change. You can't fix that stuff, right? the things that you can fix about Desmond Ridder, the things that you want to address about Malik Willis, they're fixable, diagnosable things that you can adjust and change. You can't fix the stuff about Kenny Pickett that, have dropped his stock to keep him from being a number one quarterback in this class. So for me, he has the size, he has this, really great stature. He even has the opportunity to operate outside of structure, to be able to pick up some yards on the ground as well. All that, the fake slide, I absolutely loved. I think all that's absolutely there, but the question marks for me, the things that I value or the things that you can't change, and I want to be able to kind of like figure that part out. And for me, Kenny Pickett has a lot of that. And then the leadership stuff, I would have some question marks about. Number 4 for me, Sam Howell, quarterback out of University of North Carolina. This guy at the end of 2020 was set up to be the best quarterback of this class. He was set up to be QB1 and then lost his 4 top targets last year, including guys like De'Ami Brown and others. And then, of course, didn't really have an offensive line in front of him much. They ran a lot of RPOs, all these other things. So I'd like to just see him become a little bit more of a solidified pocket passer. I think he has the traits and tools to be able to do that, to be kind of Derek Carr-ish, but with a bigger arm. But we have to be able to see all of that, right? So that's what keeps him from being able to climb back up the board, despite the fact that you try to hedge a little bit, or you try to kind of like give the benefit of the doubt, knowing that he lost so many of his weapons at UNC and all of that. But for me, Sam Howell at number 4, QB4 for me. And then at number 5 comes Matt Corral. And Matt Corral, Sam Howell, 2 quarterbacks that I wouldn't be mad if the Saints invested in them. If Jaquan Brisker is off the board in the second round, for instance, and they stand pat at 49, and they invest in Sam Howell or Matt Corral in the second round, not mad at that at all, especially Matt Corral, because I feel like Matt Corral is somebody that has a lot of those leadership qualities that you love. He's boisterous, he's vocal, he does all these things, and he's a bit of a showman as well. And I like that. I like that in a quarterback. I like that confidence and everything. So for me, Matt Corral, even though, again, same thing as Sam Howell, lots of RPOs over and over again, can you operate within a classic passing structure? You'd have to figure that out. But I think that the Saints are in a position to where they would be able to, if they draft a quarterback in the second round, then they would have the time to be able to do that, because there's no rush to get him out on the field. You didn't invest highly in him and therefore have to turn around an ROI as quickly as possible. You just get to kind of see what happens. And I think that that's a little bit more of a comfortable situation for a quarterback. So where do these quarterbacks end up going? Well, there's a lot of really good fits for them. I think Malik Willis going at number 2 to the Lions is definitely a possibility. A guy like Desmond Ridder for the Seattle Seahawks at 9 definitely makes a ton of sense. Or potentially another trade up for them if they try to come back up out of the second round. Kenny Pickett could be a guy that could end up in Carolina, could end up in New Orleans, could end up in Atlanta, could end up with another team that's trying to trade up to go after a quarterback. Peter Schrager was talking on social media as well as on TV shows and everything about Matt Corral potentially being an option for the Carolina Panthers at 6. And the reason why I highlight that is because I think these quarterbacks go a lot earlier than we expect. I think that potentially 4, maybe 5 of these quarterbacks go in the first round, and a lot of them could potentially go within the top 15. And a lot of that just has to do with the fact that this is a quarterback hungry league and a quarterback sort of obsessed game now at this point. Remember, years and years and years ago, it was about the guys that could stop the quarterback. And that's what you're going to see early on in this draft. This year would be guys like Kayvon Thibodeau and Travon Walker and Aiden Hutchinson and, George Karlaftis, like these edge rushers, the guys that can stop the quarterback, and then the corners and safeties that can stop the ball from getting to the wide receivers. Sauce Gardner, Kyle Hamilton, Derek Stingley, right? So I think that that's what you used to see kind of back in the day, but now as it's become more and more of a passing league, quarterback has just gotten inflated big time. And so I think that there's a ton of teams that are going to end up moving around within the top 10 to get the quarterbacks that they want before a team like New Orleans is up on the board at 16 and 19. Now, the Saints could potentially package 16 and 19, move as far up to 3, depending upon trade value charts that you're looking at and all that. And there's been a lot of conversation about whether or not they should do that. And even the Saints themselves, a guy like Mickey Loomis coming out and saying, hey, or the Saints could just stay put at 16, 19, 49 and walk away with 3 top 20, 3 top 25 players. So why the mixed messages? Why have we seen all of this kind of these crossing of the streams, crossing of the wires? Well, I think that a lot of it has to do with the potential of the Saints posturing. And this is the season, right? 'Tis the season for it as we get into draft season. So let's talk about why they would do that. What's the benefit of sort of putting the smoke screens out there? We'll talk about that, break that down as we continue on and wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints. So while quarterback prices might be at a premium in the NFL draft, don't pay a premium for the parts, pieces, and accessories that you need for your vehicle. It's why I love RockAuto.com. Phenomenal website that charges you the same price whether you're a do-it-yourselfer or a professional, and that price oftentimes 30, 50, 70% less than what you would pay over at those chain stores around the corner. And if it's cold outside where you are, you don't have to get all bundled up to go out. If it's hot outside where you are, you don't have to sweat. You can just do what I'm doing. Sit inside, nice, cool, air-conditioned spot, hop on your laptop, bop, or your mobile device. Head over to the website, rockauto.com. Let them know your make, model, what year, what part, piece, or accessory you're looking for, what the category is, and they're going to give you mad options for whatever it is that you need. So go and check them out. It's rockauto.com. Don't forget to let them know that Locked On sent you by writing Locked On in the How'd You Hear About Us section. Amazing selection, reliable low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Saints with a little bit of a conversation around the idea of the New Orleans Saints posturing, or maybe, putting out some smoke screens out there, right? We've seen the conflicting reports. Will the New Orleans Saints move up? Will they not move up for a quarterback, which could include them packaging picks 16 and 19 all the way up to 3 if they needed to, or within the top 5. Now, I've heard a bunch of different things. We've heard that conversation out there. I've heard about the Saints potentially trading into the top 10 for a tackle. Like, there's been a whole bunch of different conversations out there. So what's real, what's not? The simple fact and the simple answer here is that we don't know. But why is that? What's going on, right? Why would the Saints put out conflicting messages out there that literally drop pretty much right around the same time, that the Saints either intend to stand pat at 16, 19, and 49 to walk away with 3 starters, or that they plan to definitely trade 16 and 19 to move up to try to grab a quarterback within the top 10? Well, there's a couple of different reasons, right? If the Saints are interested in staying where they are, then putting out the message that they are looking to package 16 and 19 with their ability to move all the way up into the top 5 to get ahead of teams like the Carolina Panthers, the Seattle Seahawks, the Atlanta Falcons, who are, of course, looking for a quarterback as well, it puts a lot of pressure on those teams. And we talked about this a few weeks, or really last week, about the idea of like forcing the division rivals' hands, right? And the Houston Texans and the Detroit Lions, like all those teams that are in need of quarterbacks, the Saints can help to force their hands, making them trade up, right? If the Saints were to, let's say, try to move up to 5 with the New York Giants, right? The Carolina Panthers could then look to move from 6 to 5 and then have to give up a little extra something to get that spot ahead so that the New Orleans Saints can't move to 5. So that ends up depleting some of the draft capital for the Carolina Panthers and then forcing them to invest in a quarterback maybe just a slight bit earlier than they really wanted to. And then you end up, moving them off the board and all these other things. So that's one way that this could all go, right? The Saints could be putting the conflicting message of trading up for the quarterback could be the smokescreen, right? We want you to believe that the Saints are trading up so that you are forced to trade up and then draft a couple of quarterbacks early on in the top 10, which I think is going to happen anyway, and then push some of those wide receivers, offensive tackles, corners, push those positions down to the Saints at 16 and 19 and potentially 12, where the Saints could move up with the Minnesota Vikings, for instance, things like that. So that's really the intent that I can see, where the Saints putting a message out there that they would be willing to package 16 and 19 and move up to the top 5. That's where that seems to be helpful for them. The other way around is, what if it's that staying at 16, 19, and 49 is a smokescreen, and that the Saints are indeed looking to package 16 and 19 and trade up? Well, one of the things that I guess the way that ends up impacting it is that if you can sit back and say, we're good, nothing to worry about here, I'm going to sit back and just kind of wait to see how the board falls and all that, then you potentially lull the teams ahead of you into this false sense of security, meaning that they don't feel the need to go and move up to grab the quarterback, which means the Saints maybe don't have to move all the way up to 3 or 5, right? They could move to 7. They could move to, 10 and then still walk away with a quarterback that they want or some player that they want. Now, again, I am very much, and I know I've been consistent on this, and I know I'm repeating myself, but I'm just going to say it again, against the idea of packaging 16 and 19 and move up and grab a quarterback. To me, that just feels like you're missing out on an opportunity to build around what you have right now. And since you traded away last year's first round pick, it's clear that you think you're going to compete right now. So build the team that will compete. That makes sense to me. Whether that makes sense to the New Orleans Saints or not, we'll see. But that's what makes sense to me based upon the trade that they made with the Philadelphia Eagles. So putting out a smokescreen that would allow them the mobility, it helps them in terms of, if we want to, we can. that's maybe their mentality or something like that. But it doesn't marry you to the idea of absolutely having to do it. To me, the most effective thing would be to smokescreen with multiple conflicting messages, which could be what's happening right now, right? Create and generate confusion. And I think that is something that also works in the Saints' ability or benefit, because it maximizes their flexibility. It maximizes what they're able to do. So that's how I look at it for the New Orleans Saints. I mean, there's even the option here of, hey, the Seattle Seahawks didn't draft a quarterback at 9, but they're really interested in getting back into the first round at 16 or 19 because Desmond Ridder is still on the board. That's the guy that they really want. So how about this DK Metcalf right quick? Like, that's probably a little bit too big. I know, I'm willing to admit that. But if you think that a guy is your franchise quarterback, then you're generally willing to do whatever it takes to go and try to get that guy that could turn into your franchise quarterback. So again, the flexibility goes beyond just their mobility within the draft. It goes to the trade market outside of the draft as well for some of these young veterans that would be due big contracts, in a little bit, but that you could potentially get 1 or 2 years out of, not DK Metcalf in particular, but some of these other guys. So there's all these options for the New Orleans Saints, and there's every reason to continue to kind of generate the confusion if that is indeed. And look, the Saints are a smart organization, right? So if there is, some kind of smokescreen out there of these conflicting messages, it honestly wouldn't surprise me, because again, they're smart, right? They know what they're doing. Here's one other scenario for you. The Saints get ahead of the Los Angeles Chargers, which kind of signals wide receiver or tackle for me at 16, but they also get ahead at 19 ahead of the Pittsburgh Steelers at 20. Let's say that there's some team that's trying to jump the Pittsburgh Steelers for a certain quarterback that may still be on the board. Let's say Kenny Pickett, who, is my third quarterback on my list, falls and gets to the point to where the Pittsburgh Steelers are a threat to grab him at 20. If there's another team that says, hey, actually, like the Detroit Lions who pick at 32, for instance. Hey, actually, we'd like a Kenny Pickett. So, hey, New Orleans, can we jump you, or can we trade with you, give you a first round pick for next year or something, and you get to, slide back to 32, see what happens, just to be able to grab a wide receiver there. You'll be all right. Between 1 and 49, you think you can grab 3 top 25 players, then you're still in position to do that. So we're looking to trade up to 19. You can trade back to 32. The Saints don't trade back. They haven't traded back since 2007. However, if that offer comes up, they pick up the phone, they call up the Steelers. They say, hey, these Detroit Lions are trying to jump y'all. How about you move up here one spot, right? We'll let you kind of sneak up a little bit, make sure that you get your guy. We'll take 20 and then just a little bit of an extra asset in this year's draft, maybe like a 3rd round pick or something like that, which would then be another potential top 100 selection. So there's a lot of different ways for the Saints to be able to play this game. And I think that this is the part to where you start seeing some teams playing chess, some teams playing checkers, but we don't know what's going to happen until something happens, right? That's the best part about the NFL draft. Everything here is multiverse at this point. The NFL multiverse is very real. We don't know what's not going to happen. We don't know what is going to happen until it either does or doesn't happen. So we'll see what happens come draft day, but man, this is going to be a ton of fun. And I'm grateful that I get to be here with you every single Monday through Friday leading up to the NFL draft. I love doing our top 20 to 25 players, our top 25 players there at the beginning. Let's do that same thing again. Let's do day 2, do day 3. We'll do day 2 tomorrow. Some of the top 25 prospects that are expected to be available in the 2nd and 3rd rounds that could be good fits for the New Orleans Saints. We'll dive into that and much more tomorrow's episode of Locked On Saints. I appreciate you as always, making me a part of your day, making me your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, go and check out the Locked On NFL Draft podcast. They broke down a whole bunch around Chris Olave with the Athletics' Deontay Lee. Very, very good episode. Make sure you go and check that out wherever it is you get your podcast or on YouTube. Basically, wherever you're watching this, just head over to Locked On NFL Draft next. Appreciate you as always, y'all, for making me part of your routine. As always, for everything you need around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on Twitter at RawJackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you living. Let me know how your mom and them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.